minutes to go. Are you nervous?
No.
Well, I wish you would be.
Why?
Because you should be, and it's making me nervous.
Oh, Jenny. I'm just going to talk to the project director, not the President of the United States.
Well, I don't know about the President of the United States, but $12,000 is a lot of money to ask for from the project director.
Mm.
You know what you're going to say?
Mm-hmm.
What?
I'm going to say, hello, Jim. How are you?
And he'll say, fine, Gwen, what's on your mind?
And I'll say, Jim, I'd like you to consider buying the writing staff for word processors.
And he'll say, oh, those things cost $3,000 each. What's the matter with your typewriters?
And I'll say, Jim,
It's not my problem if you don't know real creativity when you see it.
Cassie, I'm sorry if I upset you.
I'm not upset. Why should I be upset when I do a job for you and you call it silly?
Well, it's not silly, but it's not right either. Why couldn't you just write what I asked? I even gave you a model.
Because what you gave me was dull. Dull, dull. You wanted me to write something interesting about our telecourse. Well, if I imitated this thing, whoever read it would be asleep by the 5th paragraph.
It only has 5 paragraphs, Cassie, so that's as far as they have to get. And this sleepy time reading happens to come from a very successful brochure. City University used it to publicize their correspondence course. And they got a terrific response.
Well, if you used what I gave you, you would get a fantastic response.
Gwen, would you please tell Cassie...
Kurt, I don't think Cassie's in a mood for anyone to tell her anything at the moment. Besides, I'm late for an appointment upstairs. Norm, you and Jenny help Kurt and Cassie to settle this problem, okay? Goodbye.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Well, Kurt, what seems to be the problem?
Oh, there's no problem. Well, there wouldn't be if Cassie would just follow the format I gave her.
Huh?
Well, I guess I better start at the beginning. Look, no one is going to see the show that you people are writing if the colleges don't use it.
Agreed.
And the colleges won't use it if somebody doesn't make them aware of it.
Agreed again.
Well, that's where I come in. Now, the first part of our information campaign is to send a brochure out all across the country. And the main part, the most important part of this brochure, is to describe our course, English composition. Are you with me?
Right with you.
Now, look, over here, I have a brochure. Now, this was sent to me by a friend of mine who's the director of information services over at City University. They have a composition course, too. It's not a telecourse like ours. It's just a regular correspondence course. But he said we could use this as a guide.
Not too eye-catchy.
Oh, well, our art department is getting up a new design for our brochure. It's a lot better than this one, really. But the part I like about this is this center section here. It lays everything out, nice and neat. Of course, it has to be redone, so it describes our program. But the outline is there, and it's as easy to follow as
It's
ABC.
paint by numbers.
Cassie,
And it's about as boring, too.
would you let Kurt finish?
So, I'm not a writer. I came to Gwen, and Gwen told Cassie to give me a hand.
And what I gave him
Wait,
was...
what she gave me was this.
Suffer from tired, run-down writing? Turn on your TV and take English composition.
See, I wrote it like a television commercial because I wanted it to sound snappy, you know, and fun to read. Clever.
Yeah. Well, it's clever, Cassie, but...
But what? What's the matter with it?
Okay, Cassie. I guess you're grown up enough for some professional criticism. Aside from insulting, unintentionally, I'm sure, the students that are going to be taking this course, you come across more smart-alecky than clever.
I do?
Mm-hmm. But even worse, you've totally missed your audience. Don't you understand who's going to be reading this?
What do you mean?
Well, university administrators and instructors, why, they'll take one look at that and think we're a bunch of stand-up comics.
Oh. See, I thought
Look,
that
it doesn't matter what you thought. This is a serious undertaking, and the language used to describe it has to be serious, too.
Exactly, Norm. Now, this may not be clever, but at least it's serious, and we know it works.
Okay, Kurt. Let's see this masterpiece. It's my old friends, the triangles and the squares.
What?
The triangles and the squares. It's a way I learned to write essay papers back in high school. See, Kurt, this part of the brochure is essentially a piece of expository writing.
Expository writing? Is that good or bad?
Expository writing or exposition or whatever you want to call it, its purpose is to explain.
Well, I understand that, but where do the squares and the triangles come in?
Well, there are lots of ways to write exposition. The way I'm talking about is very standard. 5 paragraphs long and always structured exactly the same way. Once I learned how to do it, whatever the subject, I write it in triangles and squares.
We're still waiting for our geometry lesson.
You mind if I write on this?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So you start with a triangle for your first paragraph. It's upside down because your first sentence is a broad statement. The sentences that follow make more specific, smaller statements that lead to the last sentence, which is your thesis or topic.
I see.
Then your next 3 paragraphs are squares. Think of them as boxcars, hauling the freight of what you have to say.
And this is the caboose.
Right. Another triangle for your end paragraph, right side up this time because you go from specifics to another broad statement.
Hey, 2 triangles and 3 squares. That's terrific. Now, I always knew this was a good piece of writing, but now I know why.
No, Kurt, you've missed the point. It's a formula. One way to write, but not the only way. It's like a recipe. Useful to know, but you don't always have to use it. And that recipe is all wrong for our purposes.
Why is it all wrong?
In the first place, that was written for a correspondence course. We're doing a telecourse. It's a whole nother animal. Your form should fit your subject and not the other way around.
Oh, well, why doesn't this fit?
Well, for one thing, with that form, you can only make 3 main points. And you probably have a good half dozen to talk about. And for another, you don't have to make a broad statement at the beginning and the end.
Well, how should I begin?
With an anecdote or an example of how the course works.
Now, look, I don't know beans about writing, but I have been in sales for 20 years, and I know what works. This works. It worked for City University. It'll work for us.
But Kurt,
Now, listen, I have to go down to the art department and catch Fred before he leaves. I'll be back in 5 minutes. One way or the other, though, I want to get this settled today.
It's your assignment.
one way or the other. He means his way. He's about as set as this old-fashioned formula here.
Just a minute, Ms. Arnold. That formula may have been around for a long time, but it's not necessarily old-fashioned. There are plenty of times when writing by formula is totally appropriate.
Says who?
Says her,
Who's she?
Dr. Maxine Hairston. Now watch and listen.
Now, I have been working with my class of advanced writers who are going to take the law school admission test, which now has a writing sample on it. In coaching these students for writing this kind of essay, I had said the first thing you need to do is decide what side you are going to take and then make a statement of your position. This is, in effect, telling them write a thesis sentence and then follow through on it. But I have suggested that this should be done very quickly, and they should not waste their time, but to make a direct statement. Now, I do not think that all writing assignments should be approached with formulas. Very definitely not. On the other hand, it's a good idea to have some formulas available under certain kinds of circumstances.
There you have it, Cassie. There are lots of times when writing by formula is the right formula. It's that simple.
No, it isn't. That's not all Dr. Hairston has to say on the subject. I watched the whole interview.
Best we can. So there is no one right way to write something. And I think this is true even in something that's rather formulaic, for instance, like the law school admission test, writing samples.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that part.
I bet.
Well, if there isn't any one right way, how do you select which form to use?
Well, sometimes a form is obvious, but when it's not, it may take a while to find it. Here.
Refresh your memory. Writers discover form sometimes well into the first or second draft. They may not realize that what they really wanted to say really sits right there at the end of a first draft. In other words, we don't come at writing with all of the pieces of the puzzle put together beforehand. Discovering the form of an essay is allowing the topic to grab you and to help you determine where you want to go with it or where your own thinking is taking you with that paper.
No, I've been as stubborn as Kurt. I was so stuck on my own formula, I didn't know how wrong it was.
So, you will write the essay for Kurt's brochure?
Yeah, but now I don't have a structure for it.
Time for a quickie course in composition modes.
Modes? What are they?
Find the Canavy interview, Norm.
Okay, by a mode, I mean a way of looking at any subject matter. Let's take any city. Take Denver, for instance. It's possible for a person who's writing a paper about Denver to look at Denver from many different ways. A historian might say, this is the history of Denver, and this is how Denver developed, and so on. A person who, on the other hand, is trying to invest in Denver and wants to know whether he should put his company there is not that interested in the history. He's going to make an assessment of the potential of the city, and he's going to make an evaluative account and send it to his executives of Denver. He's going to evaluate Denver. A map maker is not interested in either of those two things. He has to chart the streets, know exactly where the buildings are located, and so on. He has to describe Denver. So there are those different ways of looking at Denver. And a person who's writing has to focus on one of those about 4 basic ways.
That's it. The mode we're teaching in this telecourse is exposition, explaining things. Within that mode, there are several patterns.
So, which one do I use?
You'll probably end up using more than one. Most essays mix several patterns.
How many choices do I have?
Well, that depends on who you ask. Look, our course focuses on 6 major areas: description, narration, process and analysis, definition, and argumentation.
Sounds pretty complicated. I don't think I'll get this straight in time to do the brochure.
Actually, Cassie, you know them already. I mean, these are processes that we use all the time in speaking of writing. We just don't call them by name.
I'm back. Oh, I'm sorry I had to take off.
Kurt, I just want to say that I was wrong. Even what I did missed the mark. So I'll just have to rewrite the piece.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Cassie. Look, just take this and have it back in my office by 8.
Wait a minute, wait. I didn't say that I would take your model and fill in the blanks. I said I'd write what you need, but I do not want to use this form.
But this is the form I need.
Kurt, see, there are other ways, better ways to write about our project.
I'm sure there are other ways, but I doubt that there are better ways. And why do we have to find another way when we know that this one works?
Well, Kurt, just because it's right for someone else doesn't make it right for us. Norm and I were just showing Cassie that there's several different composition patterns she can use to make your points.
Such as?
Narration, description, definition, process, and,
Process and analysis, definition and argumentation.
Here, let me show you this tape.
Now,
I'm sure
Jenny,
you'll see that.
I know you mean well, but I am just too old to go back to school. Now, what you're talking about works great for school writing, but this isn't school writing. This is real life, and this is a real brochure.
But what I'm talking about is real, too. All we're saying is that you don't have to lean on someone else's structure for your own. Exposition is an open form, not a set one. You don't keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again like a limerick.
A limerick. Have you heard this one? There once was a student named Besser, whose knowledge grew lesser and lesser. It at last grew so small he knew nothing at all. And now he's a college professor.
Okay, look, it's Friday, it's after 5, and obviously we are all tired. I think if we take a fresh look at this first thing Monday morning
Well,
with
I
Gwen...
can't wait. I've got to have this in the printer by Monday morning.
Great.
Now, Cassie, this is a yes or no question. Will you write this the way I want it done?
if you put it that way, no.
Well, then it's either got to be Jenny or Norm.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Oh. Now, you talked to Gwen and she gave the assignment to Cassie, not to Jenny and not to me. If Gwen tells me to do it, I'll do it. But not until then. You're my friend, Kurt, not my boss.
Ditto. And while we're all still friends, I move we adjourn.
But I have to have this on Monday morning.
Well, then write it yourself.
Oh, I'm not a writer.
Gwen.
What'd he say? What'd he say?
Do we get the word processors?
Well, I didn't get to see him. He had a meeting that ran late, and by the time it finished, we both agreed we were too tired to talk business.
Well, what now?
Well, I'm going to meet with the director first thing Monday morning. Well, as you're all just leaving, I gather it took a while to settle Kurt's problems.
Well, I'm leaving Because I'm late for dinner date.
Yeah, and I'm late for my bus.
And I'm always late for something.
What was that about?
That was all about, if you want something done the way you want it done, do it yourself, Kurt.
Oh?
Now, why do they have to be so hard-headed? This isn't a hard job. With the example I gave them to follow, it's easy. And Jenny told me why it's so good. You see, this top triangle is upside down, and it sits on top of the boxes.
All right, Kurt. You don't have to explain it to me. That form is an old friend.
Well, then it has to be good. I mean, if writers use it, look, everyone except your writers, they got to be creative.
They're not exactly my writers, Kurt. I can't always get them to do what I want. That's what makes them good. They think for themselves. I'd do it if I had time, but I'm going to be spending the weekend boning up on the fine art of salesmanship. When I meet the director on Monday morning, I want to be really prepared for him.
I understand, Gwen.
In fact, I should be leaving now. I want to get to the bookstore before it closes.
Oh, it's okay, Gwen.
This book I want to buy is called The 5 Magic Steps for a Sure Fire Sale. I say, Kurt, you're a salesman. Maybe you could save me the price of the book. What are these steps?
Oh, listen, Gwen, if you want to do yourself a favor, just forget that book.
I don't understand.
Well, there are no 5 magic steps. Amateurs buy those kinds of books because they don't have the confidence to set up their own sales strategy. But you'll do a lot better for yourself if you just figure out your own approach.
Oh, how do I do that?
Well, you just go home and you sit down and think about what you want to say. It's the only way I know how.
Oh, so it's all up to me. Sounds a little scary.
Well, that's a natural reaction.
How do you mean?
Well, look, in sales, no two situations are the same and no 2 prospects are the same. You can't depend on a formula. You can't depend on a formula. Sometimes it takes a while for the light to break, but when it does, I can see just as well as the next guy.
And what do you see now?
Well, I see that in writing, maybe a little bit like dancing. You can't always do the same step. Gwen, if you will write this for me, you can do it any way you want.
Kat, you're the only one who knows how to do it properly. This is something you must write.
How many times do I have to tell you I'm not a writer?
Well, not a born one like Norm is, but you are a born salesman, and that's what really counts here. You've got experience, you've got all the information. The spelling could be a bit better, but even Norm could use some help there. What counts here is that you can do it.
You're just trying to build me up, Gwen.
Oh, you're a hard sale. No wonder the others gave up. Come on over here. I want you to watch something. This is someone who has to write all kinds of prose every day as a local broadcast journalist.
You mean a TV reporter?
Yes, a TV report has to do the same as any essay writer. Put his material in order and then put it in a form that can be easily followed.
All right, you've got my attention, sales lady.
There.
I think all stories are different, and I think all stories should be distinctive if you can do that. I think the problem in daily journalism is you say, you know, my gosh, I've covered this story 1,000 times before, and I don't think I can find a different way to write it. First thing that comes to mind is if it's a simple, straightforward spot news story, it's a lot easier to write for me because you're not dealing with nearly as many things. I've heard reporters say, this story is really complex and I'm having trouble writing it. I wish I was out on a good, gutsy fire story because you put in how much damage the fire caused, how many people were injured or how many people were affected. It's fairly straightforward, bing, bing, bing facts. Whereas with an investigative story, you've got to sit down and sort out all the points you want to make. A lot of it depends on what you come back with, what's on your tape and your pictures and your interviews. And also a lot of it depends on what happened when you were there. If it was an extremely dramatic situation, then I think you must show the audience how dramatic it was. If it were not dramatic, don't try to over-dramatize it. Simply lay out the facts, you know, the who, what, when, where, and why, in the most interesting way possible. It really depends on what happened on the story as to how you tell it.
Wait a minute, don't run!
Now, for instance, we had the Willow Creek fire, which was the largest apartment house fire in Dallas history, burned 169 units. That obviously is a very different fire from the fire that partially destroys a house, and the damage is much less. Fire story, in order to show how big that fire was, and it was a huge fire, we had our helicopter up, and we took a large, wide aerial picture of the fire, and we started with that. You could see downtown Dallas, you could see the fire, you could really show the viewer where everything was. And we started that, and all you could hear was helicopter noise, and you could see, wow, this really is a big fire.
The firefighters knew if they didn't get on top of the fire quickly, it could easily spread to other complexes.
Fire story is a straightforward story with a lot of drama, a lot of facts you have to get in there. You have to get in there where the fire burned, how many people were affected, how many were injured, how much damage there was. There are a lot of facts you have to get in there. Other stories, for instance, I covered a story on starving horses in East Texas. This was a story with very powerful images of these horses that were starved to death. And powerful pictures, some of which you could not even put on television. And those pictures were so strong that in much of that story, I let the pictures speak for themselves, and I wasn't talking on the air. But if you're asking, does every story come out about the same way if it's a fire? I'd say hopefully not, because I think a good writer manages to write about 50 fires, possibly in 50 different ways, if you know what I mean. You don't use the same old cliche that the fire gutted the building. You don't put the same facts in the same sequence in the story, because I think that bores the viewer. I think if you're really interested in what you're writing about, you find an interesting way to say it, even though you may have covered City Hall for 5 years. You have to make that story interesting and not like covering City Hall for the last 5 years. I don't think formula writing is any good. I think formulas are okay as a guideline, but when you sit down to write a news story, I think you should do it as intelligently as you can and take each story as a new entity.
That's it, Kurt. So, what do you think?
Well, I think I understand. A good reporter lets the story decide how it has to be written.
Precisely.
But I still think it would be better if you wrote it.
Kurt.
Oh, Gwen, let's help each other out. I will go see the director with you if you will write this for me. Oh, what are you doing here? I thought you went home.
Forgot my glasses.
Oh.
Have a good weekend, Kurt.
Bye, Jenny.
At least help me write it. That's not a bad proposition. What do you say?
Why is it taking so long? Do you think that's a good sign or a bad one?
Well, it's just 9 o'clock. She's only been with the director for half an hour.
I bet it's Kurt. Once that guy starts talking, he can go on for days.
What makes you guys so sure Kurt's up there?
She kept her part of the bargain, didn't she?
Well, what makes you so sure they made a bargain? You said you didn't stay.
Here is the proof. Who do you think wrote that? Waldo?
Kurt, maybe.
Oh, no way. No, this is just too good. This isn't at all like Jenny's high school standby, and Kurt was glued to that formula.
You want to bet?
You're on. $5.
What's the bet?
Sure thing. What's up?
I was just looking for Gwen.
Well, we thought you were with her.
Oh, you mean to help pitch the word processors? Well, I offered to help, but she didn't want me to. She wanted to do it on her own. You know when she'll be back?
Afraid not. You want to leave a message?
Well, just tell her to look this over. I wrote it for the brochure.
Taken by a mere child.
What's going on?
Well, Norm and I didn't think you'd written that.
Oh, I get it. And Cassie did.
Yeah. How'd you do it, Sherlock?
Well, didn't sound like Gwen, but it did sound like Kurt. Besides, there were 3 misspellings in it.
You mean 2?
3.
Well, no matter how many misspellings, you did a great job. And I owe you an apology.
Not at all. I didn't think I could do it myself.
Well, how did you do it?
Well, I just imagined myself sitting in a prospect's office. And I imagined all his questions and objections, and then I imagined the answers I'd give him, and it just started to roll.
So that's how you did it.
What do you mean?
Well, you know the telecourse and you know sales. You used your own knowledge and experience, and once you started writing, you found the form.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't need that city college brochure for a crutch at all.
Right.
Gwen!
What'd he say? What'd he say?
Well, did we get the word processor?
He said he'd think about it.
And what did you say?
I said, okay.
Well, what do we do now?
Well, keep on typing and just wait, I guess.
Wait. No one with an ounce of sales sense just waits.
Oh, so what do I do?
Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a free lesson in how to follow up on the first approach over dinner. What about it?
Talk about your smooth salesman. Well, I'm busy for dinner, but I'll go for an expensive lunch.
Good salesman knows when to compromise. I'll pick you up around noon. And in the meantime, would you look at this and tell me what you think? It's what I wrote for the brochure.
Okay.
See you, Kurt.
Yeah.
Maybe we can help you a little more next time.
Oh, you helped. You helped more than you can think about it. Why, as a matter of fact, I've got a reward for you. I wrote it over the weekend. My writing was timid and tired, worn out and nearly expired. I took your advice, added some spice, and now it's always admired.